Thank you, Pat and Michael. When we met with Dr. Markley to prepare for this event, he gave me some grief that our Power Breakfast advertisement said he has the most important job in Wilmington. He said teachers have the most important job in Wilmington. And given that Dr. Markley has a PhD in educational leadership, I decided not to debate this point with him. However, I think we can all agree that the entire school system has the most important job in our region. A survey by the Wilmington Chamber's Cape Fear Future Initiative found that business people believe improving K-12 education is the most important business issue for our community. Dr. Markley became superintendent of New Hanover County Schools 6 months ago, and he's with us today to share his impressions so far and talk about what he sees as the most important initiatives going forward. New Hanover County Schools have 24,752 students, an annual budget of $214 million, and 3,666 employees. It is the second largest employer in our region. We're fortunate today to have someone from our region's largest employer as our moderator. John Gisdick is the Vice President of Strategic Planning and Business Development for New Hanover Regional Medical Center and is leading the K-12 Education Initiative for Cape Fear Future. Please help me welcome John Gisdick and Tim Markley.
Good morning. Tim, really appreciate you being here this morning. As Rob mentioned, you know, not only is education an important business issue, but many of us in the room are parents as well. And so really, I think two perspectives today to really approach this topic. And as Rob also outlined, education probably is the #1 business issue in a survey that the business community looked at, but you know, it's also not a very controversial topic, so we've got, you know, pretty easy job today to talk about. Some of the people in the room have had a chance to meet you, but not everybody, and so really just wanted to start off learning a little bit about you, and I think one of the interesting points is how does the son of 2 high school dropouts become a PhD school superintendent, and kind of what led you down that path?
First of all, good morning, John. Good morning, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. I grew up in Maine. As you said, both my parents were high school dropouts, hardworking folks. I think their biggest disappointment was when I graduated high school, I didn't get a job. I went to college. And I went to college because of my teachers. I can remember my 5th grade teacher, Ms. Parham, vividly her class and how much I enjoyed going to that class, or Mr. John Gribben, who was my high school history teacher. Wonderful folks. But halfway through college, I ran out of money and joined the Army and ended up in North Carolina, in Fayetteville, jumping out of airplanes. They had a program where if you had some college, they would send you back to school. And so I went back to school, completed my degree, and got a reserve commission. Well, when you have a history degree, you got a limited range of what you're going to do with that. So I decided I would I'd teach for a year or two and then go find something else. Well, I've been now in the business for over 20 years and absolutely love it.
Super. What, you know, we know most recently you came from Catawba County, and prior to that you were an administrator, superintendent in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. What attracted you to the Wilmington area? Well,
I grew up in Portland, Maine, and Wilmington is a lot like Portland, Maine without the snow. I talked to my mother last week, and 6 inches of snow. It's a coastal community. It's got a lot of different things to do. It's close to the mountains, so if I want to spend a weekend back there, I can do that. So that attracted me. It was a larger school system, and I was looking to move into a bigger challenge, and I've enjoyed it so far.
Okay, great. So as the leader of our school system, I mean, what can we, as parents and as business leaders, expect from you as just kind of your approach, your style, how you will conduct business? You've only been here 6 months, but you know, hopefully many years from now, what can we expect from your management style?
My hope is that at some point when I'm no longer here, folks look back and they talk about quality of education that we had. They talk about the achievement level of our students. They talk about the folks, the building principals and the teachers in the classroom and their level of competence and what we were doing. I tell folks that the one thing you leave in the district after you move on are the folks you hired. And so I want to make sure the folks that we're hiring to work with your kids are the best people that we can put there.
Okay. As Rob mentioned, you've been here 6 months now. Been a busy 6 months. but some initial thoughts and impressions that you have, things that you expected coming in, maybe some things that weren't quite what you expected coming in.
Well, when you look at the system, at the core, you've got a very good school system here. If you look at achievement scores compared to other urban areas, Wilmington has better scores than not just any urban area in the state. We are regionally better than those folks around us, and I don't think folks realize that. Now, that said, there are some areas we need to make some improvements in. I look at some of our schools are underperforming, and we need to fix those. We need to look at the instructional practices within those buildings and what's going on. We need to look at leadership and make sure that it's the right match for what needs to be done there. So I've been generally pretty impressed with the quality of the folks here. UNCW has been a great partner in the 6 months that I've been here in terms of working with them, looking at what we're getting from UNCW and the candidates who are coming to us. And that's an advantage that I think we need to tap into more as we head into the future. The business community is committed to working with the schools, and in a lot of places that's not true. And so that's a good partnership that I think we again need to continue to tap as we move forward.
Okay, great. I know we'll talk a little bit more about some of that as we go forward. What's been your biggest surprise so far? First 6 months, what's been the biggest surprise?
Well, I think folks want our schools to do well, but I don't think that folks understand what's going on in our schools as well as they could. And there's also really some fragmentation. You've got downtown schools, you've got beach schools, you've got schools at the north end, and it's almost like we've got 43 individual schools sometimes and not a system of schools. I mean, I worked in Catawba County with 30 schools in a much larger geographical area, but that felt a whole lot more unified than we do as a system right now. And that's probably been the biggest surprise and something we'll have to work on.
So let's go with that one for a minute. So, I think, just some of the things I've done in the community, I've also seen you kind of have that fragmentation around a lot of issues. Any success or anything you've been able to do in the past that can really get the whole community pulling in the same direction? I mean, we all recognize education is the most important issue. Typically it's, but my school's first, or, all the other schools aren't good, but leave my school alone type of approach and pick your topic. I mean, success you've had or ideas you have to really get everybody pulling in the same direction and unify around education as a global topic versus, as you said, those 43 different schools?
Well, one of the things that we got to do is, I think as a school system, is improve our communications to the public in terms of what we're doing. Our public information officer, Valita Quattlebaum, has done a good job in the short time that I've been here of really helping to reframe that. She encouraged me to start a superintendent's blog that's become a communication tool for us. I think we do a better job getting the message out in terms of what we're doing. We look at perceptions of the schools. I think there was a survey from the chamber where businesses' initial impression was negative, but the more they stay with us, the better their impression gets in terms of what we're doing in our schools, and that's a communication piece. What the Blue Ribbon Commission is doing downtown is another tool that we can look at. And I've got to make sure that I'm a spokesman for what's going on in those schools. I got to get the parents involved in our schools. In July, I've talked to the chamber about starting a business advisory council, where local business leaders would come in and talk to us about what they're looking for from schools and how to improve that. We're just about to wrap up our strategic plan that was started just before I got here. So those kinds of things are going to help us in terms of building that. I spend a lot of time in schools, and I think that it's important to see what's going on the ground, and then make sure that what's happening in the building is what we say is going to happen, and make sure I've got the right leaders in place to make that kind of changes we need.
Now, and I know we'll hit on a lot of those topics this morning as well, but you just mentioned leaders, and I know in conversations you and I have had, you've stressed that leadership is extremely important. It's probably one of the most important pieces, and your principals are a key part of success as well as your teachers. So some initial observations about leadership, principals, the role they're playing, and things we can do to help them.
Sure. When you think about education, the hardest job in the world is when the teacher closes the door and it's them and 30 students. That's the most difficult job in education. But I'll often tell my principals, while you may not have the hardest job, you've probably got one of the most important, because the principal sets the tone for what goes on in that building. All of you as business leaders, think about your own businesses. You as the leader in that business, set the tone for what that place is like. And so that's why the principal is critical. And what I've seen is that we've got some very competent principals, but their background was classroom management. They went from classroom management to assistant principal to principal. And so sometimes they may not have that business skill set that somebody who came out of a business leadership program might have. But they've done a good job, I think, working with that. But they focus a lot sometimes on management. What I really want are instructional leaders. I want folks who can make the clocks run, get the kids to class on time, make sure the buses run. That's baseline expectation. But at the end of the day, are we helping kids learn? Is what we're doing in the classroom under their leadership helping to improve students? There's some research out of Colorado, and it says that a good teacher by themselves can raise student achievement to a certain point. But when I can match a good teacher with a good principal, I can not only raise that teacher's scores, but I can raise those scores school-wide. And that's why it's critical to have good instructional leaders in our schools. Because as parents, you're going to interact probably first of all in that office with the principal in terms of just trying to figure out what's going on. And that principal needs to understand the importance of that kind of just basic communication.
Okay, great. Question from the audience. David at table 43, I think really goes with what we were just talking about, speaking of perception. And so really looking at, from the business community, economic development and recruiting new businesses and key individuals into town, what would you say to somebody whose perception of the school system is playing into whether or not they move their business or their company to Wilmington?
Well, I would say get past the initial perceptions. How many real estate folks we got here before I start? You folks are critical. When somebody is moving to our county, they have a conversation with their realtor about, well, where should I live? And realtors will tell them, well, this is a good school, this is not a good school, and oftentimes they're basing that on data that's 4 or 5 years old, or perceptions, or when their kids are in school, but they don't have kids in school anymore. I would say for somebody who's moving here, get past that initial perception, take a hard look at the data in terms of what we're doing in our schools. We have some areas we got to improve. Our graduation rate needs to be better, but we're still graduating more kids than we've ever graduated from schools here in Hanover County and across the state. And they need to understand that. We're also educating them to a higher level. Look at what we're doing, look at the quality of the kids that we're putting out, and I think that you'll be surprised at how good that data is. Our SAT scores are above the state average, above all of the urban school districts around us. So if I'm a business, you've got one of the best community colleges in the area, you've got a 4-year university sitting here, and you've got a K-12 educational system that competitively outperforms all the other urban districts in the state. You add to that infrastructure, transportation, and this should be, by logic, a place that a business would look to come to.
And I know one of the things you and I have talked about quite a bit is that communication, and for lack of a better thing to call it, marketing our school system. That we've talked about realtors and industrial development folks and economic development folks, that we really need to get them this information in a succinct way, some type of leave behind or some type of piece that they can take, and when they're interacting, whether it's business clients or even, when I moved here just as a new employee coming into the area, got small kids, you start asking about schools, and as you said, we got our advice from our realtor, and so making sure we get them that information is critical. I know one of the things
the Chamber's actually doing something with that in terms of putting together sort of a fact sheet for schools. Because my hope would be is at some point that when folks come here, they ask their realtor, where do I send my kid? And the answer from the realtor is, you can send them to any school in the county and not worry about it. And when I've hit that point, then I'll know we've been successful in terms of what we're doing in education.
Past, present, future, digital. You live the moment. We'll make it last. Call us at 910-399-1820 or go online at ppfdigital.com.